I never imagined that 4 weeks in a hospital could change my life forever. I spent those days in a sterile, white room, hooked up to machines, fighting for every breath, thinking about nothing more than surviving. I was 68, retired, widowed for almost a decade, and used to living life on my own terms. I managed my finances, my home, and my little routines without needing anyone. But when I returned home, I realized independence can be fragile, incredibly fragile. And sometimes, the people closest to you can become the ones you fear most. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. I arrived on a crisp Thursday morning. The sun was shining, birds were chirping, and part of me wanted to feel relief. I wanted to feel the comfort of my home, the familiarity of the creaking floors, the smell of the garden that I had tended for decades. But what I saw stopped me cold. The locks on my front door had been changed. Not just that, moving boxes were scattered across the porch. My son, David, stood there with a smug look, and behind him, my daughter-in-law, Laura, and her parents were already moving in. "You've been declared legally unfit," David said casually, as if he were reading the weather forecast. I laughed at first. I couldn't help it. I laughed because the absurdity of it struck me. I, Margaret Thompson, a woman who had handled every financial decision, every bill, every tax form, and every minor emergency for 40 years, was suddenly legally unfit according to my own son. I laughed, but deep down, a knot began to tighten in my stomach. This wasn't a joke. This was real. And I had no idea how deep the rabbit hole went. How could this happen? I asked myself the question over and over. Had I really become so vulnerable? Was this a misunderstanding? Or had someone, or multiple someones, plotted this while I was lying helpless in a hospital bed? My mind raced. The doctors, the nurses, the legal letters, none of it had prepared me for the betrayal waiting at my front door. You have to understand, my relationship with David had been complicated but affectionate. We'd had our disagreements, yes, but I never imagined he would go this far. And yet, standing there, his eyes cold and unwavering, I realized that the man I raised, the man whose first steps I had watched and whose first words I had heard, had made a choice, and it was against me. Laura, of course, was smiling politely, but there was an edge to it, a satisfaction that made my blood boil. Her parents, Henry and Mary, were already directing movers, arranging furniture in my living room, as though they had always lived there. I watched them from the sidewalk, trying to process, trying to breathe. The familiar creaking floors, the scent of my home, the place where I had poured decades of love and care, it was being invaded, and I couldn't just walk through the door. I started to ask questions, small ones at first. David, what legal papers? Where are they? He waved a dismissive hand. It's all been done. It's legal, Mom. The hospital confirmed you're not competent to manage your affairs. Not competent? I had handled my own bank accounts, my taxes, my mortgage, and my investments for 40 years. I had signed every check, balanced every ledger, and navigated the twists of life without relying on anyone. And now, in a matter of weeks, they wanted to strip me of everything I had built? As I stood there, anger bubbled, but it was mixed with disbelief. My neighbors peeked through curtains, some offering sympathetic nods, others whispering in surprise. I caught a glimpse of a friend across the street, their eyes wide with shock. Even they didn't know how to react. I didn't either. What made it worse was the subtle way David and Laura's family had maneuvered it all. While I was in the hospital recovering, they had quietly consulted lawyers, presented medical statements, and filed petitions that claimed I could no longer manage my own life. I was legally incapacitated, or so they said. Every day I had been fighting to survive, they had been planning my downfall. I tried to reason with David, my voice shaking. This can't be legal. I can contest it. There must be a mistake. He shook his head. No mistake, Mom. It's all been reviewed. You need to rest. Let us handle it. Rest? I wanted to scream. I wanted to storm in and take back what was mine, but I couldn't. I had no key. I had no control. And even more frightening, I realized that David was confident. He believed he had won. And if I wanted my life back, I would have to be smarter, faster, and more cunning than I had ever been in my life. But even in the midst of fear and anger, a tiny spark of defiance ignited. I had spent 68 years navigating life's challenges, and I wasn't about to let a legal paper and a changed lock dictate my fate. I knew there were cracks in their plan. I knew that if I could find them, I could exploit them. I just had to figure out how. I didn't yet know the depths of deception I was about to uncover. I didn't know the secrets David and Laura were hiding, or the lengths their parents would go to claim what wasn't theirs. But one thing was clear, this was not over. And what I would do next would change everything. I opened the car door and froze. The sight of my own front porch made my chest tighten, my stomach twist. The familiar red bricks, the garden I had tended for decades, the little bench where I used to sit with a cup of tea, all of it had been invaded. Boxes were stacked like walls of a fortress. And standing there, arms crossed, smirking just slightly, was David. My son. You've been declared mentally unfit, he said again, this time with an almost casual finality. I stared at him, incredulous. My mind refused to accept it. For decades of independence, decades of handling my own money, making every small and large decision, gone in a few weeks while I lay in a hospital bed recovering from an illness that nearly killed me. I tried to push past the shock, but the locks on my door reminded me immediately that this was no dream. I jiggled the handle. Nothing. Locked. Completely, irrevocably, locked. My house, my sanctuary, was now out of reach. Laura and her parents were already inside. I could see through the glass panels that they were arranging furniture, laughing quietly, clearly enjoying themselves. Their ease, their sense of entitlement, made my blood boil. It was as if they had always belonged here. And in a way, their actions said exactly what David's words implied, I no longer had a say. I raised my voice, trembling with a mixture of anger and disbelief. David. What legal documents are you talking about? Who said I'm unfit? He shrugged, the kind of casual gesture that made my pulse spike with frustration. It's all been handled, Mom. You need to rest. We're taking care of everything now. I laughed at him, a short, sharp laugh, full of disbelief. Handled? David, I handled everything for 40 years. Every bill, every bank account, every investment. And now, this? How could you? David didn't answer. Instead, he glanced over at Laura, and I saw it there. Quiet satisfaction, the sense that they were playing a game I didn't even know existed. And maybe I hadn't. Maybe I had underestimated just how fast they could move while I was incapacitated. But even as the betrayal hit me, my instincts kicked in. I had always been resourceful, and I had survived every challenge life threw at me. This wasn't going to be the end of my story. I refused to accept that. Mom, just calm down, Laura said, her tone sweet but sharp. You're exhausted. We're only trying to help. Help. The word echoed in my mind like a lie. This wasn't help. This was a takeover. And it had been meticulously planned. While I fought to survive in the hospital, they had quietly consulted lawyers, filed petitions, collected medical statements, and executed a plan that stripped me of control. Every day I had been unconscious, they had been strategizing. I realized something else, too. David's confidence wasn't arrogance. It was certainty. He believed he was untouchable. And for the first time, I understood the gravity of what I was facing. They weren't just encroaching on my home, they were attempting to rewrite my reality. They wanted me out of the equation entirely. I caught sight of my neighbors through their windows, some offering sympathetic looks, others whispering among themselves. No one had seen this coming, I thought. Not even me, and I had lived long enough to expect the unexpected. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my shaking hands. I would not fight this with anger alone. I needed strategy, I needed patience, and I needed allies. I remembered my old lawyer, Mrs. Allen, who had always said, "Margaret, knowledge is power. Information is survival." And she was right. I could feel it stirring in me, the need to dig, to investigate, to find the cracks in their plan. Somewhere, they had left an opening. Somewhere, they had underestimated me. And if I could find it, I could turn the tables. I began to ask questions, careful, deliberate ones. "David, where are these legal documents? I need to see them. I have the right to contest this." His smirk didn't falter. "Mom, it's done. There's nothing more to discuss. Just relax. Let us handle it." Relax? I wanted to scream, to push past him and storm into my own house. But I couldn't. Not yet. Not until I had the advantage. As I stepped back onto the sidewalk, I noticed a folder left near the porch, half hidden behind a stack of moving boxes. A glimmer of hope sparked inside me. Maybe it was accidental. Maybe it was a mistake. But whatever it was, I knew one thing: it was my opportunity. I wouldn't let them see it, not yet. I would collect the evidence quietly, methodically. I would not allow them to think I was powerless. Not my son. Not Laura. Not their parents. And I realized then that this fight wouldn't be about just getting back into my house. It would be about reclaiming my dignity, my independence, and the life I had built with my own 2 hands. I took a step back, examining the house from the sidewalk, trying to memorize every detail, every window, every possible point of entry. I didn't have my keys, but I had my mind. And that was more powerful than any lock they could put on my door. A week later, I would act. And what I did next would leave them all speechless. But for now, I had to watch, wait, and plan. Because if they thought they had won, they had another thing coming. After standing on my porch, locked out of my own home, I walked slowly back to my car. Every step was heavy, but my mind was racing faster than it had in years. David and Laura thought they had me trapped, that 4 weeks in a hospital bed had made me helpless. But they underestimated one thing. A lifetime of independence teaches you more than how to manage a home, it teaches you how to survive, how to fight, and how to think 3 steps ahead. I drove to a nearby cafe, a place I had frequented for decades, and sat quietly, my hands wrapped around a steaming cup of tea. I needed to think. I needed a plan. I couldn't just charge back into the house with anger. That would play into their hands. No, I needed precision. I needed leverage. First, I reached out discreetly to Mrs. Allen, my old lawyer. "I need your help," I said, my voice calm but firm. "It's urgent. David has somehow declared me mentally unfit and is taking over my home. I need to understand what's legally possible." Her response was swift, her tone a mix of shock and determination. "Margaret, if what you're saying is true, we have a case. But we need documentation, proof of your competence, anything that demonstrates you've been handling your affairs responsibly." I hung up and thought, where would I find that? The answer was obvious, in my own records. Bank statements, tax filings, correspondence, investments, bills, decades of careful management. David might have tried to paint me as incapable, but he hadn't considered how meticulous I had always been. He had assumed that a hospital stay meant weakness. He was wrong. Over the next few days, I became a quiet detective. I combed through old files I had stored at my workplace, my email archives, and even receipts I had kept in a shoebox just in case. Every document was a piece of armor. Every signature, every ledger, every cleared check proved my independence. I also started observing David and Laura. Their confidence was like a shield, but even shields have cracks. I noticed the subtle ways they spoke to each other. Small disagreements, hesitation when dealing with money, tiny mistakes in their handling of my property. They were arrogant, and arrogance is blind. And I intended to exploit it. Neighbors became allies without even knowing it. One by one, I subtly asked about what they had seen while I was hospitalized. The movers, the new furniture, the way David had talked to people as if he owned the neighborhood, it all became evidence. Their casual demeanor didn't fool me. I started documenting it, taking careful notes. This wasn't about revenge yet, it was about building an undeniable case. Then came the revelation that surprised me even more. While reviewing some of the paperwork David had left behind, I noticed inconsistencies. Certain medical statements had been hastily signed, dates didn't line up, and some reports had ambiguous wording. If challenged, these errors could render the entire declaration of mental unfitness questionable. I realized that while David and Laura had been playing a game of speed, they had overlooked the one person who never panicked, me. I wasn't just going to fight back, I was going to dismantle their plan piece by piece. I had patience, knowledge, and an entire lifetime of experience on my side. There were moments of doubt, of course. I would sit in my car late at night, gripping the steering wheel, wondering if I was too old to outmaneuver my own son. But then I remembered all the times I had faced hardship and survived, the years raising David on my own, the financial crises I had weathered, the health scares I had overcome. I had lived long enough to know that fear is a tool, not a master. I decided on a 3-step plan. Step 1, gather indisputable evidence of my competence. Step 2, observe and document the intrusions and missteps of David and Laura. Step 3, identify the legal loophole that could nullify their claim. Everything had to be precise. Impulse would ruin it. Patience would win. As I prepared, I also allowed myself small moments of levity. I chuckled quietly to myself when I imagined David thinking he had outsmarted me. If only he knew how many chess games I played in my life, I muttered. I've always seen 3 moves ahead. That humor, that quiet satisfaction, fueled me. Each day, I became more confident. Each document I retrieved, each discrepancy I noticed, added weight to my arsenal. And through it all, I kept my composure. David and Laura were blind to the storm gathering quietly behind my calm exterior. Finally, after a week of careful planning, I had what I needed. The hidden folder I had seen on my porch, combined with my meticulous records, would be enough to challenge them. I knew the confrontation was coming, and for the first time since being locked out, I felt a rush of empowerment. I took a deep breath, looking at my house from across the street. They were inside, oblivious, confident, and certain of their victory. But victory is often temporary when arrogance blinds judgment. And I was about to remind them of that in a way they would never forget. I was ready to act. I had patience, strategy, and the truth on my side. And soon, very soon, I would turn the tables. The morning I decided to act, the air felt charged, electric. I had spent a week gathering every scrap of evidence, every ledger, every email, every witness testimony that could prove my competence and expose the cracks in David and Laura's plan. I wasn't just prepared, I was armed with truth, and truth has a way of cutting deeper than any anger or accusation. I parked across the street, taking a moment to compose myself. The house looked peaceful from the outside, the kind of calm that hides storms. But inside, chaos reigned, or so I hoped. I stepped out of the car, clutching the folder with the documents, and walked up to the porch, my heart racing, my mind laser-focused. This wasn't just about reclaiming a house, it was about reclaiming my dignity, my independence, and proving to my son and his family that underestimating me had been their gravest mistake. David opened the door before I even knocked. His smug grin faltered slightly when he saw the folder in my hands. "Mom, what are you doing here?" he asked, trying to maintain authority. I held up the folder and smiled, a calm, deliberate smile. "I'm here to settle this. Once and for all." Laura and her parents appeared behind him, and I felt their confidence ripple, momentarily shaking them, but not for long. They assumed that I was emotional, reactive, and vulnerable. They didn't know me. They didn't understand that preparation is a weapon, and I had sharpened mine. I stepped inside, setting the folder on the dining table. Everything you've claimed, every assertion that I am legally unfit, rests on documents that are flawed, I began, carefully choosing each word. Hastily signed medical statements, misdated forms, inconsistencies in your filings. And here, I opened the folder, letting a few pages fall onto the table, are decades of records proving I've managed my own finances flawlessly. Every account, every payment, every tax filing. I have done this for 40 years. David's face paled, and Laura's polite smile tightened. Their parents exchanged uneasy glances. I could see it, this was the first crack in their facade. You can't just come in here and claim these mean anything, David stammered. Oh, but they do, I said calmly. And there's more. Witnesses. Neighbors. People who can attest to the fact that your little takeover happened while I was in the hospital and without my consent. They saw your moving trucks, heard your conversations. And all of it was unnecessary because, as it turns out, your legal claim is built on errors that could nullify everything you've done. The room went quiet, the kind of silence that hums with tension. I let it settle, giving each of them time to feel the weight of what I had just said. You've been playing a game you thought I didn't see, I continued, but I've been watching, documenting, and preparing. And now, it's time for the truth. I calmly outlined every flaw, every inconsistency, every misstep. I presented the witness statements, the financial records, the medical reports. Each piece landed like a blow, eroding their confidence. David tried to interrupt, but I was relentless, precise, deliberate. Laura's parents tried to argue, but I had anticipated their every objection. Their words faltered when confronted with evidence, and suddenly, the household that had seemed so secure now felt unstable. Their arrogance was cracking, and I felt a surge of satisfaction, not from revenge, but from justice. You see, I said, closing the folder gently, this isn't about anger. It's about fairness. It's about recognizing that a mother, your mother, cannot be cast aside simply because you wished to move in and claim control. David's shoulders slumped, and for a moment, the boy I had raised seemed almost small and vulnerable. I could see the internal struggle in his eyes, the realization that he had miscalculated, that he had overreached. And yes, I added with a calm, sharp edge, I am taking back my home. Not just because it's mine, but because I've earned it, maintained it, and defended it. And if anyone thinks otherwise, the law will side with truth. Not entitlement. The room was silent for what felt like minutes. Then, quietly, Laura's parents began gathering their things, defeated. Laura herself glanced at David, searching for support that wasn't there. David looked at me, a mix of shame, frustration, and shock. I let the moment linger. This was the payoff of a week's meticulous work, a lifetime's worth of vigilance finally paying off. I walked to the kitchen, moved a chair into place, and sat. For the first time in weeks, I felt the weight lift off my chest. My house, my sanctuary, my life, it was mine again. But the lesson lingered. Trust can be complicated, even with the people we love. And sometimes, the people we raise can surprise us in ways we never imagined. I smiled quietly. And yes, I said, almost to myself, I will be changing these locks, permanently this time. And as I looked around at the room, the empty spaces where they had tried to insert themselves, I realized something else. Resilience isn't about strength alone. It's about knowledge, preparation, patience, and the courage to act when the moment comes. But even as I celebrated quietly, I knew one thing: family dynamics are never simple, and the echoes of this confrontation would reverberate for years. And in those echoes, I would be ready. Because victory is not just about reclaiming what is yours, it's about showing the world that no one can strip away your life, your dignity, or your independence without consequence. The house was finally quiet. The echoes of David, Laura, and her parents had faded, leaving me alone with the life I had fought so hard to reclaim. I walked through each room slowly, letting my fingers brush against the furniture, the walls, the familiar surfaces that had been mine for decades. It was more than just a physical space, it was a testament to my independence, my resilience, and my unwavering determination. Sitting down at my kitchen table, I allowed myself a long exhale. The fight had been exhausting, emotionally and mentally, but it had also been enlightening. I realized, with a mixture of relief and sorrow, that betrayal can come from the people we love the most. It doesn't matter how long you've raised someone, how carefully you've guided them, or how much love you've poured into their lives. Sometimes, they make choices that shock, hurt, and even humiliate. And sometimes, the only way to reclaim your life is through patience, strategy, and a refusal to be diminished. I thought about David. He was still my son, but our relationship had irrevocably changed. I saw the mix of shame and resentment in his eyes during the confrontation, but I also knew that this experience had left its mark on him. Perhaps, in time, he would understand the weight of what he had attempted. Perhaps not. Either way, I could not let his mistakes define me, nor could I let them diminish the life I had built. Looking around, I also reflected on Laura and her parents. Their arrogance had been their undoing. They assumed that strength comes from numbers and planning, but they underestimated the power of knowledge and experience. I had survived 4 weeks in a hospital bed, nearly fighting for my life, and I had returned to find my own son turning against me. And yet, I emerged victorious, not through brute force, but through clarity, preparation, and unwavering resolve. I paused to think about the lessons I had learned in this ordeal. Independence is precious, but it can never be taken for granted. Trust is vital, but it must be paired with vigilance. And most importantly, age is not weakness. At 68, I had more than enough wisdom, resilience, and cunning to reclaim what was mine and to defend my life against those who sought to undermine it. The neighborhood had noticed the confrontation, though no one spoke directly to me about it. I imagined the whispers, the speculation, the surprise that a quiet, elderly woman had managed to outmaneuver a family bent on taking her home. And I smiled privately at the thought. Sometimes, strength comes from the unexpected. Sometimes, resilience is quiet but unstoppable. I took one final walk through the house, reflecting on every corner, every memory. The living room where I had celebrated birthdays, the garden where I had spent countless mornings tending flowers, the kitchen where I had cooked meals for family and friends, all of it was mine again. But the victory was not just about property. It was about reclaiming my voice, my autonomy, and my dignity. And yet, as I stood in the sunlight streaming through my windows, I recognized that life would never be exactly the same. The confrontation had shifted relationships irrevocably. David's choices had created a distance that might never be fully bridged. Trust, once broken, is difficult to restore. But I had learned that even when betrayal strikes, it is possible to rise stronger, smarter, and more prepared for the future. I thought about the future with clarity. I would change the locks, yes, but I would also remain vigilant, informed, and ready for any challenge that might come my way. I had learned that life is unpredictable, that betrayal can lurk where you least expect it, and that independence is a treasure worth defending fiercely. As I sat at my kitchen table, folder in hand, I felt a quiet satisfaction. The battle was over, but the lessons would remain with me forever. I had confronted the people who sought to undermine me, exposed the flaws in their plan, and reclaimed what was rightfully mine. And I had done it with dignity, patience, and intelligence. I smiled, thinking about what I would tell others about this experience. Not just the story of betrayal and conflict, but the story of resilience, strategy, and empowerment. I wanted people to know that no matter your age, no matter your circumstances, you can reclaim your life when it is threatened. You can rise, even against those you once trusted, and emerge stronger than before. And as I looked out the window at the quiet street, the afternoon sun warming my face, I realized one final truth: victory is not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes, it is quiet, methodical, and deeply satisfying. It is the knowledge that you stood your ground, defended your life, and refused to be diminished. And though family dynamics would continue to be complicated, though David and Laura might harbor resentment or shame, I knew one thing for certain: my house, my life, and my independence were once again firmly in my hands. And I would never allow anyone to take them from me again. So, to anyone watching this story, remember this: strength is not just in power, it is in preparation, knowledge, and the courage to act when the moment calls for it. And when betrayal comes knocking, you can stand firm, reclaim what is yours, and emerge stronger than ever. Because at the end of the day, the life you build, the dignity you maintain, and the independence you protect are yours to defend. And sometimes, defending them is the most empowering thing you will ever do.